You're listening to the Recovered Life Show.
And it was pretty exciting. You know, President Biden had a State of the Union, and he was talking about addiction, and I'd love to talk about that a little bit.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you Google presidents about addiction, it was so interesting to see, you know, it first started with Nixon and then, you know, Ronald Reagan, President Reagan, and then several others. And it was really cool to see the difference in the messaging as we continue to talk about these things. President Biden basically let us know that they've earmarked $41 billion to have this health initiative. They talked about the fact that overdosing has become dangerously common from, you know, fentanyl being laced in the drugs. And I know we don't always talk about the drug addiction, but people are dying daily from it. And the initiative also has something that I think is very exciting in it, which is it's going to go directly to programs. They're calling them Mommy and Me programs, because that is a hole in our system where women who need to get help, who have children, don't have anywhere to go because they don't have any place to put their children. And so the Mommy and Me, I think I thought it was beautiful to hear that. The rehabs or the inpatient rehabs that I've had around here, only like one allows you to bring your children in. And that's like a big problem if you're trying to get sober, and they need our help more than anyone.
We typically do not talk about politics on the Recovered Life Show because I just never have. I find that in recovery, politics are very alienating. So sure. I don't, look, the message is the message, right? This is about recovery. But I read all that and I found that's interesting.
Yes.
And, I being on, working in recovery, you see people all the time that don't have the resources that want to get sober. And they're physically addicted.
Yes, they need help.
Maybe have mental health challenges. They can't. And, historically, sometimes that money doesn't really get to the people who need it.
I'm aware of that.
Like,
yes.
I've seen that in Los Angeles, like, condos that are, that are $1.5 million. And they only really help 5 people. Right. Like, so
yes.
I've seen that stuff. But I what I found interesting, I hope this goes to everybody who needs it. Of course, I think it's money well spent because, we know that when people get into recovery, they thrive for the most part. Right. Like,
they do.
I really like that. But here's what I want to talk with you about at the beginning of this. I want to dive into where he's earmarking this money.
Right.
But this is interesting because I'd never seen this ever before.
Ever.
This number. His quote here: "If you're suffering from addiction, know you're not alone. I believe in recovery, and I celebrate the 23 million Americans in recovery."
Wow.
That number, I was like, wow.
It's a little low, I think.
I think it is low. I was wondering what, of course, I'm competitive, so I was wondering what number I am. And the people that are alive that are recovering, like, where am I? Am I going to be in the 3 million, the 5 million? Like, where am I gonna fall? Right. I want to know my ranking.
You're so funny. 23 million that are in recovery, but we know that there's at least 10 million people out there, just with the statistics of what we've discussed on this show previously, maybe even more, that really need help, which is one of the reasons why I think Recovered Life is such a blessing to our community. I agree with you that there's probably some definite holes in it, just because it seems like that always happens every time. But having the discussion, I think, is improving. It started with war on drugs, and there's all kinds. If you do the history, if you dive into it, you'll see that a lot of it started in the Nixon era. And the other part of this is the harm reduction. And I think that can be politicized, and that I feel is very unfortunate. And harm reduction means that they are, taking this huge population that is addicted medically, that will shut down, and they're slowly bringing them off. And I think a lot of times it's confusing to people. They think black and white, they need to stop, get them stopped, but not always is that the case. Sometimes that can be really, really dangerous. Yeah. So I hope that people, like, for me, I didn't even understand what harm reduction meant for many years until I started to realize, you know, how much danger there is involved. And when we're looking at results, it actually works. Statistically, it works.
Well, I think, I think I always find this interesting because I see where the resources, I had an experience a couple of years ago
Uh-huh.
with a men's group that I was involved in the Valley here in Los Angeles. And there was a young kid that had
Hmm.
joined us. I'm not going to, get into any of the details here. But he clearly had major addiction issues,
Hmm.
physical addiction issues. He also had some mental health issues. Um, Getting people sober, getting people into facilities is not so easy.
Mm-mm.
Like everybody says, like, and I have family members and friends who are not in recovery. It says, well, why don't they just go detox or why don't they just go into a program? It's not so easy.
It isn't.
Even if you have really good insurance, sometimes it's, as an interventionist,
There's
just,
not enough
you're
beds
such
out
a good
there.
interventionist,
Yeah.
Kristina,
And there's not
but
enough beds.
yeah, there's not enough. But even getting an interventionist,
Hmm.
to work for you on your behalf, to find one that's going to work for you, that's right or whatever. It's hard, and there isn't enough beds. And I know here in Los Angeles, the options that we had with this kid, and this has happened several times where we've had to get people together that are in recovery to come up with some sort of resource to be able to get people in places,
Right.
because the reality is that it's not so easy. So, and then, so there's that side of it. And then there's the other side of it that I found interesting, because they talk about drug overdose deaths in
Huge.
Pennsylvania.
Right.
Well, totally. What was like, I'm reading the number here,
Well, it was 100.
104,000
Yeah, 104,000.
Americans have died.
And yeah, and we were talking specifically, I think that number is actually low, because I
Oh,
still
I don't think
feel,
it's right.
no, I still feel that, alcohol is one of the most dangerous drugs out there. And I'm not sure, I mean, I really believe that they didn't include that. They're specifically talking about, I believe, the huge surge in fentanyl. And here's the thing, it's such a dangerous drug that if somebody happens to have something laced, I mean, they're gone. They're gone. And we don't talk about that pandemic or epidemic very much. And I think that it was awesome to hear it from our lawmakers, that we need to do this. And sometimes harm reduction is the very next step, right? Because as people are getting to their decision or they're figuring it out, they need the help to get off of the chemicals and the drugs physically, then they can make better decisions. But going cold turkey for some people is a death sentence. They cannot.
Well, I
do
saw
it.
that you were talking about Nixon and Reagan had made comments, and I wasn't as I know that, obviously Betty Ford,
Yes.
that was a huge, like when Betty Ford came out,
So big.
being one of the elite,
Mm-hmm.
people of the United States. I don't even know how you'd say that, but, being able to come out and say, hey, I have an addiction problem and other people do too. It's slowly, but I think that's such a big thing, whether taking the politics out of it,
Right.
that if you, and the money out of it too, to just recognize that there are millions of people in the United States that have done the deal. So I
Yes.
think if you're listening to this, that should give you some hope if you're struggling. If you're downloading this and you're like, wow, I'm not going to be able to get through another day. Look, there's been a lot of people. There's a lot of people in recovery, way more than you know.
Right. And addiction is addiction. I also think that there's the classes, like almost a caste system here in America, like, oh, I just drink, so therefore I'm better. And a lot of people, and you've said this before, that there have been people that, they were on, I mean, the oxycodone, the opiate, and they were given to it honestly by their doctors. There wasn't a lot of disclosure about how addictive it was. And then you have someone who has managed their life pretty well that is out buying heroin because the opiates are gone. And then the heroin is laced. And so this is happening. It's across all classes, right? And
look, I mean, I know, and we have to be, in this climate, we have to be careful about some, as we say, with the platforms that we're out on, unfortunately. But look, at the same time, we're talking in the State of the Union about the drug companies.
yes.
And at the same time, we're talking about opioid addiction.
Yes.
And I'm not saying every drug company or whatever, but there were predatory things going on with drug companies and opioid
Oh,
addiction, right?
absolutely.
So not to name any names, and this is my opinion, but look, when you look into the facts, it's not good. But here's the thing that I think that's also interesting about this too, Kristina, is that the fact that recovery is so mainstream, and
Right.
I find, here's been my experience, and I want to ask you about this.
Hit me.
My experience with money in recovery and politics in recovery, it never works out well.
No.
And no, like no matter what they do, because I think at the end of the day, it's not that I don't think money is important. I do. You have to
Yes.
have
It's
it, right?
necessary.
Like,
Yes,
look, you do intervention work. It's super expensive.
it
You're
is.
flying around places, you're doing stuff, you're staying in hotels, there's transportation, there's detox,
Exactly.
it's really just overwhelming the amount of cost. But the thing is that community, I think, is what gets people sober. Community is what
Completely.
and in all of these things, I notice that they come out, it's never about building community.
No,
It's
no, they
always about
don't.
how do we fund this? How do we fund that?
Yes,
But
yes.
it's not at the tip of the spear, in my opinion.
Well, and the people that direct the studies that go out and get this empirical evidence, they seem to forget that the peer support piece is important. If you ever attend something, just so everybody knows, the interventions that I do are open interventions. So they're not the get you, I got you kind of interventions. And they include a year of community after, that it's about healing the family system. And so it's, maybe different than the television show that happened, that sometimes people, when they hear that word, that's their example. But if you ever listen to a lot of medical professionals talk about addiction, they never share, well, I shouldn't say never, often they skip the part about peer support.
Yeah.
And I believe peer support is the number one reason why I stayed sober and am staying sober. And, because if we all know that drinking excessively and, putting a needle in our arm is taking our life into our own hands, we do know that here. But until we have examples of people that love each other, that are living a sober life, we can't conceptualize. Like I said, when I first got sober, I didn't even know there were other people out there that drank like I did. And
Yes.
that is huge. That is huge. And so every program, I wish they would do that. And I think eventually we'll get there where they start talking about that piece of it.
It is big. And, and I think the one thing that I would like to, say that I totally support here
Mhm.
that I found great was this comment that he did do, which we brought up on screen
Yes.
right now,
Yes.
about just saying, hey, you're not alone. 23 million people are out there that are in recovery. And, there's a lot of people, a lot of business people, and there's a lot of politicians and people that are outwardly open saying, like, look, we've got to deal with this, because if being involved, look, you're in Orange County,
Yes.
and I'm in Los Angeles County, and addiction has I'm not going to say ruin the cities. I think it's a drastic statement, but it has definitely put
It's harmful.
a tint
Yes.
on the quality of life here in Los
Yes.
Angeles County. And it's sad, because as someone who would like to help people in recovery, and as somebody who has a track record of doing that, it's very hard to do. It's very, very hard to do. And, when you get right down to the nitty gritty of it, it's these small little hole in the wall, 12-step meetings that are barely holding on
Mm-hmm.
through a couple nickels and quarters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or one person or two people business people decide that, no matter what, even if we have to go out of our pocket, we're going to make sure that there's a room here every Wednesday,
Right.
or,
Right.
5 days a week. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes to keep this moving. And look, I mean, any kind of money, even if it's not spent well, is I think appreciated, because we have to find a way out of this, And if you're
Oh,
listening to this, look, you might be
willingly.
listening to this, and you're sitting under a bridge in Phoenix,
Right.
and you're like, hey, you know what? It hasn't worked out for me, and there are no resources to get. I firmly believe that the biggest resource that people have is willingness.
Yes, yes.
That
And
is it. There's no amount of money that's going to be able to buy willingness.
no, and once you see other people, that's why the peer support, once you see other people living a life and you have something, some kind of example, the willingness gets even bigger and bigger, but it's that beginning part. And I think the more we have conversations, the less we the less we stigmatize addiction, and recovery too, the better off we will be. And I really love it. Gabrielle Jello talks about her generation, and it's very exciting to me to watch people talk about it. There's still a party culture, and sometimes you're doing well and that comes right along. I hear all kinds of stories where somebody's successful and part of their success in their mind is the party atmosphere. There's still businesses that, if you don't order a drink, somebody thinks something is wrong with you. It's really interesting to me. So I hope we keep having these conversations.
Well, I think that the party scene, the drug abuse, alcohol abuse scene is alive and well.
Very well.
And I see it going on. I was shocked. I had a family friend. I was at a party and there were 2 or 3 people that were older that were in recovery. They were like, one was in his 70s.
Oh, wow.
Late 70s, and had gone through the whole thing, in the 70s and 80s, literally, right? So long-term sobriety, and they're talking about the change and the difference of the awareness of kids. Now, at the same time, I think that kids have an awareness that people can become addicted, that there is some physical thing, that mental health plays a huge role in it. And so it's amazing how much they know.
Right.
Right. But at the same time, you see we could do 5 stories today about kids in college overdosing on ketamine.
Yes.
Right.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. As much as we're becoming aware, the drugs are becoming more powerful.
Harder. Yeah.
And they're dangerous. You can go out and experiment for the first time ever and die.
Yeah.
So we are really in a place where we're in the fire stage. Like, we have to continue to come and talk about it and, share and be old fuddy-duddies. I have a good friend who's been in recovery for a long time. They lost their son, and it was his first year of college, and he was never a kid who partied or got into trouble.
Yeah.
And boom, he was gone.
Well, the peer pressure, and, and this is the 23 million Americans. We're not talking about the people who, even if that was an accurate number, which I don't think it is, I think it's much more.
Yes.
But if you, and I don't know where they get that number too, but it doesn't matter. It's good that it was mentioned, right? Like,
it is.
I just want to state, like, I'm really glad that he mentioned that. And I definitely applaud that. But we're not talking about the people who are already in trouble that haven't been identified.
Right.
Right. So there's, as anyone who knows that's listening to this, it's been in the recovery game. And I think, listen, man, I will tell you, I have been a guy in recovery who's done a lot, and I've been a guy who's done nothing. Right. To help people. I've been that guy, right? There were years where I didn't really do any service or anything like that. Right. And I will tell you, I think it's on the people that have gotten this gift.
Yes.
It's going to be people who have gotten this gift. You don't have to do a show like Kristina and I are doing. You don't have to you could spend an hour a week just helping somebody.
True.
Just checking in with somebody per day, right?
Yes.
The economy is really bad right now. It's harder. It could be, look, if you've been blessed and you have success, it could be just helping somebody out, getting them into a rehab or whatever, right? Like, it doesn't take billions of dollars. Sometimes it just takes a couple people who really care.
Right. I mean, I am a product of my sobriety of an employee assistance program, but I have met thousands of people that somebody was willing to take them, to a place to introduce them to other people who were in recovery. And that is absolutely the most important thing, in our lives. I had years where I have, everybody knows that I have a high support needs son. And it was very, very difficult for me to be out there, and helping people. But I still was able to show up and attend that meeting weekly. I had one home group, and I was able to take some phone calls. So, and it increases your life joy. So service is everything.
Service totally changed my life. I say this openly. It's like, you really get to be like, you can only acquire so much stuff. You can only acquire, right? So it's like, at the end of the day, you look back and you say, wow, having an effect on people in that way brings something to you. So if you're listening to this, I'm just telling you, if you're in Cincinnati, Ohio, driving the car saying, you know what, maybe I could do a little bit more. I challenge you, do a little bit more, right? Like, and I think take what Joe Biden said, as the acknowledgement that, hey, there are so many people out there doing it. What would happen if just these 23 million people decided one day that they're all going to help one person, right? That would be, the whole, it's just like the Recovered Life show here. It's like, giving $1 or $5, to help us out.
Right.
I got to tell you, Kristina, it doesn't seem like a lot. It's like, well, how does that work? But if 1 million people give $5, the amount of information that we can put out to people who are suffering is amazing.
It is huge. And like you said, you don't have to have a show. You don't have to shout it from the rooftops. You don't even have to be recovering out loud. You can find people, they're out there where we can be of service to another human being. And I think that more now than ever, we need to double down on this part of our lives.
Yes. It's what a great segment. Thank you, Kristina. This is so great. Thanks for bringing this to my attention, because we had this talk yesterday and I said, so I see all these things on social media and I'm like, what's this about? And you did the research and brought it in. And thank you so much. This is really great. And I think the message of this segment is more can be done. More is being done, and we applaud anyone who's willing to even make an attempt. Honestly, it's to that point. Anyone who's willing to make an attempt, we applaud.
The time is now.
The time is now. Well, as we go into the transition here into our next segment, I wanted to let everybody know about a really great free gift that we have for everybody. And if you're listening, if you like gifts, you're like, ooh, I like that. I like that. I like free gifts. Kristina and I Kristina actually did put together this free 3-day challenge that is really a primer for anyone that's in recovery. It's called Can't Say No. And it's a 3-day challenge. And I want to say that it's centered in codependency, Kristina.
It is.
But it's a little bit more than that. It's really kind of like, people might be listening to Kristina and I talk about codependency and say, is that me? I don't know. You don't worry about it, is what I'm telling you with this. Can't Say No. Can't Say No is a 3-day challenge for people that really can't say no. And if you're constantly overwhelmed, listen to me when you're saying this. Like, if you're listening to this, and you're constantly overwhelmed, you're an over volunteer. You can never do enough. You feel that maybe people are kind of, in a way, using you a bit, right? Like you're just in this cycle, but you're not really getting anything from it. It's just this big cycle. I'm telling you, you need to go to recoveredlife.us/can't say no and take this 3-day challenge. It takes a minute to sign up. You also become a free member of the Recovered Life community. You can join the conversation, and Kristina walks you through how to set boundaries in 3 days that can totally change your life.
Absolutely.
It does. It changes your life. It's very easy. All you have to do is go to recoveredlife.us/can't say no. That's recoveredlife.us/can't say no.